You're not here by accident. Something about XRP pulled your attention today, and whether you realize it or not, that curiosity already puts you ahead of most people. Because right now, while timelines are noisy and headlines are spinning in circles, something very quiet but very important is happening around XRP. And no, this isn't about telling you to buy, sell, or panic. This is about understanding what most people are completely missing. Take a breath for a second. Forget price for a moment. Forget green candles, red candles, and dramatic thumbnails. Ask yourself one simple question. Why does XRP keep surviving conversations that wipe out hundreds of other crypto projects? Why does it stay relevant even when it's not trending? That's where today's story really begins. Most people think markets move because of news. In reality, markets move because of positioning. News just gives people something to blame after the fact. XRP has been living in that misunderstood space for years, where price doesn't reflect preparation, and silence doesn't mean inactivity. What you're seeing on your screen every day is only the surface layer. Underneath that surface is infrastructure thinking, regulatory alignment, and long-term financial plumbing that doesn't care about daily emotions. And that disconnect is exactly why XRP keeps confusing people. Here's the uncomfortable truth most influencers won't say out loud. By the time something becomes obvious to everyone, the real opportunity, whether positive or negative, has already passed its most important phase. Markets don't reward awareness. They reward positioning before awareness. XRP was never designed to be loud. It was designed to work. That distinction matters more today than it ever has before. Right now, the global financial system is under pressure to move faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. Cross-border payments are still slow, settlement still takes too long, liquidity is fragmented, and every year that passes without fixing those problems costs institutions billions. This is not a crypto problem, it's a financial infrastructure problem, and XRP sits directly in the middle of that conversation. Now let's slow this down even more, because this is where people usually get emotional and miss the point. XRP doesn't need everyone to like it. It doesn't need retail hype every week. It needs one thing: relevance. And relevance doesn't come from Twitter trends. It comes from usefulness. While most projects chase attention, XRP has been forced to chase compliance. That's not glamorous. That doesn't go viral. But in the United States especially, compliance is not optional. Institutions don't move money based on vibes. They move when legal risk is defined. That's why XRP's regulatory journey matters, not because it's dramatic, but because it's rare. Very few digital assets have been tested this publicly and still remain operational, liquid, and globally discussed. Ask yourself this: how many crypto projects could survive years of uncertainty, intense scrutiny, and constant debate and still be standing? Not many. That alone should make you pause. Another thing most people don't realize is how markets actually determine value. Price is not truth. Price is behavior. It reflects what people are willing to do under uncertainty. And uncertainty is where XRP has lived for a long time. But uncertainty doesn't stop development. It doesn't stop conversations behind closed doors. It doesn't stop pilots, testing, or integration. It only stops headlines. And headlines are not infrastructure. This is where patience becomes an unfair advantage, not blind patience. Educated patience, the kind that understands timelines instead of reacting to every candle. Now, if this kind of grounded conversation is already making you think differently, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this content matters, and it helps more people escape the noise. And if you want calm, policy-safe, hype-free crypto discussions, subscribe. You won't regret it. Let's keep going. One of the biggest mistakes people make with XRP is assuming its future depends on daily price movement. It doesn't. Its future depends on whether the problem it solves still exists. And right now, that problem is becoming more visible, not less. Global payments are under strain. Liquidity efficiency is becoming a priority. Transparency is no longer optional. Systems that can't scale cleanly are being questioned. This is not speculation. It's a shift in financial expectations. XRP was designed for that shift long before most people were paying attention. Now here's where things get interesting, and where the word shock starts to make more sense. Not as hype, but as contrast. The shock isn't a sudden price move. The shock is how different reality looks when you stop watching the market like a casino and start watching it like a system. Most people are trained to react. Very few are trained to observe. When observation replaces reaction, panic disappears. You stop asking what just happened and start asking what behavior does this system encourage? And when you ask that question about XRP, the answer is very different from what social media suggests. This asset was never meant to move fast emotionally. It was meant to move efficiently operationally. That's a completely different game. And the reason this matters right now is because markets are slowly transitioning away from pure speculation toward utility-driven narratives. That transition is messy. It creates confusion, it creates frustration, but it also creates opportunity for those who understand it early. XRP doesn't need tomorrow to be dramatic. It needs tomorrow to exist. Continuity is its strength. And the longer you watch this space, the more you realize that survival under pressure is not a weakness. It's proof of design, and that's exactly why what's happening right now feels so strange to so many people. Because when you're trained to look for fireworks, you miss the quiet rewiring of the system underneath. XRP has never been about grabbing attention for a single moment. It has always been about positioning itself for moments that most people don't even see coming. Think about how financial systems actually change. They don't change because people get excited. They change because existing systems become too slow, too expensive, or too inefficient to justify their own complexity. And right now, global finance is reaching that friction point. Cross-border payments are one of the clearest examples. They still rely on layers of intermediaries, delayed settlement, and opaque fees. That structure made sense decades ago. It makes less sense every year. This is where XRP's story becomes uncomfortable for people who only watch price charts. Because progress in infrastructure doesn't look like progress on a chart until much later. It looks like meetings, it looks like testing, it looks like legal review, it looks like waiting, and waiting is the one thing markets punish emotionally, even when it's strategically correct. Another reality most people don't want to face is that markets don't exist to reward participation. They exist to allocate capital efficiently. If you're early but emotionally exhausted, the market doesn't care. If you're late but disciplined, the market doesn't judge. It simply responds to behavior. That's why the loudest voices are often the least prepared. Volume doesn't equal insight. Confidence doesn't equal accuracy. And excitement doesn't equal progress. XRP has lived through every phase of the crypto market cycle. Early optimism, explosive hype, sharp backlash, regulatory uncertainty, public doubt, quiet rebuilding. Very few projects ever experience all of those stages and continue forward. Most disappear somewhere in the middle. That survival changes the psychology around an asset. Over time, it shifts from what if to why is this still here? And that question forces deeper thinking. Another piece people overlook is liquidity behavior. Liquidity doesn't chase narratives, it responds to structure. Assets that can move value efficiently at scale attract attention from players who don't talk publicly. They don't need to. Their participation shows up in different ways, often invisible to retail observers. This is why comparing XRP to meme-driven assets misses the point entirely. One is built for attention, the other is built for function. Attention fades quickly. Function compounds quietly. Now let's talk about fear, because fear is the most powerful force in markets. Not because it's rational, but because it's contagious. Fear spreads faster than information. It compresses timelines. It turns long-term thinkers into short-term reactors. XRP has been a magnet for fear-based narratives for years. And yet, despite that, it remains liquid, tradable, and globally relevant. That doesn't happen by accident. At some point, fear stops being a warning sign and starts being a filter. Only participants who can tolerate uncertainty remain, and those participants tend to think very differently from the crowd. This is where perspective becomes everything. If you believe markets exist to give you clarity every day, you'll always feel frustrated. If you understand that markets exist to test behavior, clarity comes later.